Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Psilocybin Says.
This is Courtney Rose.
Eric Osborne, and today we're talking about too much, man. You took too much.
I think I ate too many mushrooms, dude.
I was thinking today, one of the... this conversation that you're going to listen to is about long-term exposure to psilocybin, but one of the great things about mushrooms is that rarely, maybe 3 times in my life, of all the hundreds of times I've eaten mushrooms, maybe about 3 times have I ever thought, whoa, I ate enough. Usually it's like, that was a lot, but I probably could have eaten a few more.
Yeah, so in this episode, we come up with no definite answers on how many mushrooms are too many mushrooms, but it's a fun conversation, and there's a lot of anecdotal stories that we share.
And we agree that Eric ate too many mushrooms in Jamaica.
Yes, that is one thing we did conclude officially.
I'm still maybe a little bit back and forth on it, but...
Yeah, well...
I'm doing okay now, so... What is too much? That's the question, though. It's not for us to answer, for you, but we explore this topic in this episode, and I've certainly come to some realizations. Yeah, I probably don't need to eat mushrooms 6 times a month.
Yeah, so if you enjoyed this episode, please do give it a like. It helps us a lot, helps more people find us. If you're watching on YouTube, that is. If you're not, we highly recommend it because we're quite... sexy over here.
My Iggy, Courtney calls this my Iggy Azalea jumpsuit.
Yeah, so just for that reason alone, check it out on YouTube.
Yeah.
Give us a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, let us know what you think. What are your experiences with eating too little or too many mushrooms? And definitely, if you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, leave us a review. 5 stars, please.
And those of you who are, because we're getting more of them, especially on the old iTunes or Apple Podcasts, you're rock stars. We really appreciate it because that is what's going to help get this thing going.
So without further ado, enjoy this episode.
It just kind of struck me last night when you laughed in my face and said, hell yeah, you took it too far. I was asking Courtney last night, did I push it too far in Jamaica? Because there were some things that were happening in my energy, in my physiology in the last few days that reminded me. Can I talk about it? I want to talk about it because it's really, there's some value here, even if it's just for me.
We can talk about it.
I'm integrating a lot of stuff still. So my son and I were hanging out in a parking lot the other day, waiting for my other son to get his prescription from the pharmacy. And I don't know what inspired it, but we started doing laugh yoga. If you've ever heard of laugh yoga, it's a thing years ago. I've heard people talking about this where you go and make yourself laugh, and it's an exercise. And so we were frightening. It's a little weird.
If you're not expecting it.
Just someone just maniacally laughing for 5 minutes. So anyway, when we were doing this, I started getting this purgy feeling and a lot of mucus coming up, and it clicked. I realized that, I used to spend hours and hours just...
That freaks me out when you do that.
Oh, anyway. Well, everybody used to love my laugh in Trip Space, and I think that it probably still
Everybody might be an exaggeration.
No, every fucking body. Every single living creature within the mile radius that could hear it.
Yes, I'm sure.
Anyway, and that's not exactly outside. But anyway, it struck me that I had not been laughing nearly as much as I used to. And then I kind of started thinking back on all of that and remembering how many hours I spent in these extreme emotional states, and also reflecting that my system, my physiological system had gone through a pretty massive, what seemed like a withdrawal almost, or an adjustment, a downshift. You know, it's like going from like sixth gear to first gear without, you know, slowing down. And yeah. And so it just kind of had us in this conversation about too much psychedelics. What's that look like? And Courtney, I asked her, I thought if she thought I overdid it in Jamaica, and she very quickly laughed in my face and said, yeah. To which I was kind of surprised.
So you were just getting at me for not laughing enough. So,
well, it's interesting that you don't want to play laugh yoga and you don't want to take LSD.
You know what? If I recall the other night, after
or get tickled.
Half a Delta gummy, you were making fun of me for laughing and being ridiculous.
Baby, I'm
and
just gonna make fun of you. I'm gonna give you a hard time.
It's interesting that we keep making fun of each other.
Well, I read a headline on an article.
Then you might have
the other day. So now I'm an expert.
Right.
That said that couples that pick on each other last longer.
Oh.
So lucky us.
Perfect. We're going to last forever.
I should tickle her right here on camera so you all see.
Don't.
I'm not going to. I know we've already.
Then you'll watch Eric develop a bloody eye.
Anyway, so it has this conversation about is there such thing as too much psilocybin? You know, there is no recorded lethal dose. There are some anecdotes of individuals who may have died from acute, I don't want to say toxicity, but system overload maybe, cardiac arrest. I think there's only 2 cases that are speculative as being cardiac issues from psilocybin. One of those was an infant, very, very young, that accidentally consumed psilocybin, and they think also maybe consumed some Galerina, deadly species. And then there was an individual in the UK, I believe, who had an arrhythmia or some kind of pre-existing condition, and he ate something like 150 Liberty Caps over the course of a day.
He must have been hungry.
Well, Liberty Caps are very little. They're very, very, very small.
Still,
no, it would be. Well, I ate 75, not Liberty Caps, but Panaeolus fineskis or whatever they are now. And that was a lot, no doubt. But, you know, they're little bitty, flimsy mushrooms. Liberty Caps are significantly more potent. Anyway, there's only 2 anecdotal instances of anyone being of any potential toxicity coming from psilocybin. So, there's been no clearly established LD50 to my knowledge as I've continued to read. But that doesn't mean that just because something is completely non-toxic in itself that you can't overdose, right? There are instances. There was a radio show where that lady did the water challenge, right, to see who could drink the most water, and she died from drinking too much water, and the radio station was sued. And I think that was because they flushed all of her electrolytes out or did something systemically. Mm-hmm. So, you know.
Just because you can doesn't mean
you should.
Will help you live a more balanced, healthy, happy life.
Yeah. And so as psilocybin becomes more mainstream, I would love to share this experience, and maybe it can provide insight for others. I knew going into Jamaica and starting those retreats, I knew that there wasn't any public documentation of someone that had taken as much mushrooms as I had. You know, there were stories of people who did one really big dose, or, someone took 100 hits of LSD and, is better off because of it. But the long-term cumulative effects, I don't know, have been really, we had the opportunity to study those well. And so I knew that I was a guinea pig of sorts, and I was grateful to be that.
So is this like a call out to researchers to study you?
Oh, I've been asking for years. I've been saying for years,
please,
study
take my blood.
My brain.
Look at my brain. Yes.
So anyway, but no, I want to have this conversation and share my experience, hear from you as an outsider what you saw. There is such thing as too much psilocybin. It's a lot. There's a whole
Yeah,
lot.
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Far more than any of you listening will likely ever come close to.
Or even see, you know.
Takes a very special individual to even begin to approach the interest of consuming that much psilocybin.
Definitely takes a unique individual to want to keep going back. You know, it's like you enjoy torture and pleasure equally.
Yeah, that's about what I was going to say. Yes. So let's go back.
Okay, yeah. So how much was I consuming? I think that's the starting point, right? So first of all, I want to say that in my early experiences with psilocybin, starting at age 19 when I first consumed psilocybin, the very first time I took mushrooms, I took them for 3 days straight. The first day I tripped, first night, I was like, oh shit, I done found home. Well, I'm just going to stay here then. And so I just ate. I had like a quarter bag of mushrooms and I just ate the entire thing over the course of 3 days. On day 3, I woke up with a massive headache, really nasty congestion, and just felt shitty and thought, okay, that was too much. So for the next few years there, I went and I can reflect back on that, and I think that it was more of an energetic issue.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Kind of like when you do a cleanse, like how on the third day you feel like total crap.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's all coming out and you just feel horrible.
I think that's what was happening. Yeah.
Hard to know.
It is hard to know. And there's no resources that we have where we can go to and discuss this and find information. So after that, though, I felt from like 99 to probably 2003, 4, maybe even like 2006. It was a while. If I ate mushrooms every 3 months, that was a lot. You know, you have an experience and you're like, well, that was massive. I'm going to sit on that for a while. And so for a long time, it was like no more than every 6 months. A big part of that was not having mushrooms, but also just it being such a big and powerful experience to not feel the need to go back there. And then even when I started growing my own mushrooms, it really only became like every 3 months. It was not a really regular thing because I felt like it was so overwhelming and it was just such a big deal. And so then started the farm in 2009, and I was out there where I had more time and space and was growing a lot more psilocybin. And at that point, I started kind of ramping up a little bit just because I wanted to explore the space more and felt like I had more opportunity to do that. So I started going in then about once a month. So I went from every 6 months to every 3 months over the course of, call it 7 or 8 years, until really close to 10 years, 99 to 09. So I started going every month in 09, and by the time 2011 came around, the mushrooms had then told me that I was going to start these retreats. They said to me that Jamaica was going to be the lighthouse of psychedelic wellness and that you were going to light the torch, which was and still is pretty incredible to reflect on because that is exactly what happened. It's crazy. I resisted it. I said, no. And they said, yes. And so finally I gave in. And after that, I said, okay, well, if this is what you are going to have me do, then I need to know you inside and out. And so at that point, I started consuming high doses, 5 to 10 grams, in like mid 2011, twice a month. And in 2012, I committed myself to consuming that high dose, 5 to 10 grams by myself every new moon and full moon for the entire year of 2012 to prepare for these retreats. The retreats didn't start until 2013. Still kept taking mushrooms at least twice a month most of the time. It's maybe not true because when you and I got together, we would take mushrooms probably once a month, and I was finally in a relationship that I enjoyed, so I wanted to spend time with you. My previous relationship, it sucked, and I was happy to go away and eat mushrooms. And so probably didn't eat them more than once a month after we met in 2013.
Which was me coming in hot on the mushroom scene.
Yeah.
That was a struggle for me to try and get myself to eat mushrooms every month.
And we eventually backed off, I think, in large part because of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It was kind of like, I mean, it's not, eating mushrooms is something that like you plan to do it and then you prepare to do it, you fast or whatever your process is, and then it's time to do it and the mushrooms are sitting right there and it's like, oh, is this really what we want to do tonight? I know we haven't eaten any food for over 24 hours and we've been talking about it for the past 48 hours, but like, we're really going to do this? There were a couple times we backed out.
Oh, there were a number of times where we decided not to.
Yeah.
And it's fine. It's all worked out. It's all been good. So anyway, go to Jamaica in 2013. We start these retreats in November. 2014 and 2015, 2016 is when it really started going. And during that time, we weren't doing retreats necessarily every month. They were probably like every other month. And I would then typically dose with the group every single time. So once a month, I was taking mushrooms 3 times a week, or 3 times, in 1 week. Or
smaller.
Smaller doses, not like 10 grams, like 3 grams was my general dose that I would take with groups. And then as that started ramping up, then we started doing retreats every month, and people would want me to dose with them, and I would want to dose with them. And so it got to the point where for 2017 to 2019, at least, if not more, I was taking mushrooms minimum 3 times a month over the course of a week. And sometimes when we would have groups that were 10-day groups or 2 retreats in a month, then I would take either 4 doses or 6 doses in a month. And that went on for a while until...
You were dosing that often in a retreat?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess from my recollection, I remember it being more like 1 to 2 times per retreat.
By the time you came down there in later 2018, 2019, and by the time you were living down there with me, then I had pulled back a little bit because it was getting to be a lot, especially when this is probably 2019 is when we started doing retreats consistently twice a month. And that was just
sometimes 3 times.
Yeah. And that was just way, way too much. And there were a number of times over the course of 17 to 20 where I did have concerns of whether or not I was taking too much mushrooms, because I would find myself on just an emotional roller coaster and with so much energy that I didn't know what to do with. So go ahead.
All right. So we also have to consider that in the midst of, it's not as if you're a participant at a retreat eating mushrooms. It's that you're the PIC, the person in charge of, at the end of the day, the buck stops here person for these mushroom sessions with people, and eating mushrooms, not for yourself, but with the intention of helping other people move their own energy and being a founder and operator of an international business. That's like doing all of that whilst eating mushrooms, processing people's energy with like absolutely 0% time for integration yourself.
Throw a few LSD doses in there too while we're at it. But yeah, so, I got a high capacity for a lot going on at once, right?
Yeah, but
So I understand that this is completely, everybody is different. And I am not saying that anybody should do what I did. I'm not saying that less is better or more is worse or anything. It's so individual. And what you're saying is really true. It's also something that I would suspect that the majority of people listening to this podcast right now have no idea what you mean when you say you're taking mushrooms for someone else. And that is a very different level of engagement and processing, because you are not just working with your own material. I still can't imagine. I guess the question that I don't know the answer to, that I'm curious about right now, is if I was to take mushrooms 3 times a month, just myself, without anybody else around, would that actually be more overwhelming? Because when taking mushrooms for other people, you are conscientiously, if you know what you're doing and you're good at this and you can, then you're conscientiously putting all of your shit aside. Like, none of this is mine. And so it's almost like you just become this pass-through vessel for other people's stuff. And I wonder if that's actually more sustainable than if I was to lay on this couch and take, 7 grams of mushrooms 3 days a week, once a month. You know what I mean? Because my attention is on them and everything that's around me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting to think about. Like, my logical answer might be different than my actual, probably would be different than my actual experiential answer. I would think it probably depends on where you or anyone would be at in their life. And in the instance of holding space for other people that much, and if you were to be doing what you were doing in Jamaica in the retreat space a couple times a month, say, and eating mushrooms on your own in between that, I would think that would be a very rigorous experience.
No, that's too much, yeah.
But if it's just switching it out totally,
that's what I'm saying,
instead of, I don't know.
Definitely. I feel like it is actually less on the system for me to be working with other people. I don't know that that's true. And
what has you feel that way?
Because when I'm working with other people and I'm tripping for other people, it's like I was explaining to someone the other day, that when I'm helping someone process information, I am not trying to get any specifics of information. I am just a pass-through vessel. And so I may be, purging or doing whatever is going on to move this stuff, or flapping like a bird or whatever it is, to help move energy through, but I'm not being overwhelmed with the secrets of the universe. Whereas when I trip by myself, then it's usually that. It's either my own personal psychological material processing and being with all of that, or it is being inundated with all this kind of cosmic information or communications from beyond, or whatever it is. And it's much more like just clocking in and clocking out when I'm dosing with other people. And then when that session is over, then I definitely have some integration to do, some processing to do myself, but I don't know that it has that same personal content that is even just like more dense.
So in the context of a retreat setting, like in Jamaica, where a bunch of strangers are coming in every week or every other week, whatever, and heading into this extremely vulnerable space. And for you too, like you're opening up to a certain degree, like your energy field for them, to which when I think about it like that, it's kind of like sex. Like, I mean, opening your most vulnerable yourself up to other people's energies and having to conscientiously protect or have safeguards, and like, you don't know these people, so what are they going to bring? Like that similar level of energy exchange for complete strangers. Like, and then they leave and they're gone. And doing that over and over and over again, basically you're a prostitute. Sorry. Am I a mushroom prostitute?
Well, guess we know the title for this episode.
I've never thought about it that way, but it really seems like an accurate description.
1,000 people. Over 1,000 people have been inside of me.
A bit of a mushroom whore there, Eric.
I'll take it.
Wow. Okay. It's your new sanctuary title.
Slut. Shroom slut.
Anyway, so comparing being a mushroom whore to like, like, being an actual, the more like indigenous community model, say, or just community model, where, say, like Maria Sabina, like her holding space for people in her community regularly. And yes, of course, there were foreigners that started coming in and whatever, but like in that model where you already know everybody, you know what people are generally going through, you are intermingled, you're all like, you're already integrated. The amount of energy that it takes to like prepare yourself, I would think, like logically thinking of this, would be so much lower. Holding space in that way intimately with people you're already so integrated with in community. I mean, even just thinking of the camping retreat that we did with Sanctuary. From, of course, I didn't have the role that you had, and I didn't eat mushrooms when I was holding space. But like for me as a space holder, and even administratively, that level of energy that I put into that, it just felt so much easier because I knew already so many people there. And it's like, okay, I already know, like, I'm going to talk to you next week. I'm going to like, in a way that's familial, like in a very natural, organic way. I just wonder, like with Sanctuary heading into this more of a model like this, where we're always like staying connected with each other. If
definitely takes the pressure and the weight of being the, like you said, the person in charge. It spreads that out a lot for sure, right? Because it's not strangers for the most part. I mean, there's a lot of new people coming into our community, but they're not necessarily looking to me to be the guy to do the thing for them, and that's great. In Jamaica, it was just inevitable. People came there. I'm the guy that knows the most or has the most experience. People see me on the podcast and all stuff. Whatever, they come there, they think I'm the guy that's going to be that's there. And I very often, and if I think about like when I took too much mushrooms, so to speak, it was when I took mushrooms out of a sense of obligation. Like there were so many times when I felt like, okay, these people paid a lot of money for me to show up for them fully. And even though they don't understand and may never be able to perceive the ways in which I'm showing up for them, it's still my obligation to show up for them fully. And I did. And I felt like that meant taking mushrooms. Now, what I'm also finding too now, though, is that when I am working with somebody, even if I'm not taking mushrooms, and if I'm going to show up fully, it's not a lot less exhausting. And because the mushrooms opened me up so much to this understanding of how to use my body and my energy as a tool, then like I can now go into that without mushrooms. And I feel like that's part of my responsibility. What maybe is the biggest difference that I'm reflecting on now? I wonder if Matt over in the UK ever listens to this podcast. I love you, Matt. What I'm reflecting on now is that in Jamaica, a big difference. For one, with me eating mushrooms so frequently, I was always open. I was almost like just so sensitive and such a kind of a vortex that, that why I mentioned Matt is because after the retreats were over, I was very often still having to help the staff process, right? And I would be so energetically open. I'm reflecting on a specific time where we were having a facilitator just hang out. It wasn't like a formal meeting or anything. We're all just kind of hanging out. And I started going into this kind of thing. I could feel this uptake of anxiety around me. And I started kind of doing my process to move it out. And after a couple of hours, whatever, we're hanging out there. And then afterwards, Matt came over and he was like, "Did you just do that to me? Did you just work on me?" And I was like, "Well, why?" He's like, "Well, because like I was feeling a lot of anxiety and I was feeling really, really too much, overwhelmed. And then like I felt like you were taking it off of me. And then I felt better soon after that." And I was, because.
Did you know it was him?
Yeah. But it wasn't just him. It was like the whole group there, but he was the biggest part. But like that's what I found myself experiencing, that I was just so sensitive to energy, and so open to it that it was just like the job never ended. There was one time tripping with Kevin and Tiffany and all that up at the Grow house, and I was like, just going to take some mushrooms for myself and have an enjoyable day taking mushrooms around the mushrooms. And I ended up like Tiffany started feeling all weird, and I didn't have a choice. I was just like there doing stuff and helping her process stuff, and she didn't even know it. And then she like felt better. And I remember Kevin saying, "It's because he's back there behind you doing shit." And so, it's just like, I don't think it is the mushrooms per se, right? It's what they opened up in me that became so overwhelming, if that makes sense. And cannabis can't be excluded from this conversation either, right? Mm-hmm. It is a psychedelic, and I still, if I smoke cannabis, particularly in groups of people, then it's not unlikely that I'm going to experience some kind of this whole thing, kind of the way that it works for me. And so I know that as psilocybin becomes more accessible here in the U.S., and we have more people working with it, that there are going to be these issues that come up, and people are going to have these questions. And I think one of the most important things to communicate in this is that, yes, you can go too far, too fast, but this is a very forgiving substance. Because if I could do what I did to the extreme that I did, and I feel like coming back to a pretty normal place? I mean, I don't know. What would you say, like in the last couple of years, as I've not been taking mushrooms like that, what are the big differences that you see in my personality that would indicate that I am readjusting, if any?
Well, yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah, I want to hear everything that you think on this.
Well, for one, what was coming up for me as you were speaking was, again, going back to like questioning the model of things, which we've done so much in this transition period in the last couple of years. Just wondering, like, because even as you're explaining, you're reflecting on all of that, you look stressed. Like, just it, not like you look stressed, but you can tell how stressed out you were. Just revisiting, watching you speak, it just like your face just got really like, oh, like strained. And like, that's how you walked, or that's how you looked a lot. Like, and I didn't even realize it until COVID hit and the retreats stopped because people couldn't get in and we had to cancel those retreats. And then all of a sudden, I mean, it took like a month, but I realized, wow, you look good. Like I didn't even realize you were looking so like weary and tired and easily aggravated. Like I just had become used to it, and I'd become used to myself being like agitated and tired and didn't even know. And so there's that. You don't look like that anymore. You don't walk around like a constant state of like it looked like you were processing, kind of like when you see somebody trying to solve a really hard problem, just like, just like, just face scrunched up. And that's kind of how you walked around looking. And you were smoking cannabis constantly. You were constantly, consuming cannabis. There's that. And it has me wondering, like, we saw so often therapists coming to Jamaica, and therapists being some of having the most intensive, challenging to work through experiences that were sometimes like brinking on dangerous, like for them being like physically violent and other things. Just seeing the amount of processing that they had to do in that experience, seeing that and seeing you being the processor over and over and over again, like has had me wondering for a while, is this really the model? Like, is this the model we really want to perpetuate? Is having one person, like a therapist, that this is their one job, and it's such an intensive job in order to make it work, you got to do it all the time and have very little time for yourself. Like, this is the model that we're finding ourselves in for pretty much most professions, I'd say. Like, they hyper focus on one thing, they do the thing all the time, and generally are drained and have little time to experience other perspectives and integrate. And so it brings me back to Sanctuary and what we're doing with our minister programs, trying to spread that weight, as you say so often, spread that weight out amongst everybody in the community. And maybe not everybody, but a lot more people in the community, so that we can share that energy exchange. And it's not going to happen overnight because, like, I mean, you've been training for a position like this for 20 plus years. And so it doesn't happen overnight, but it just seems inherently unhealthy to be doing that intensive of work so often. Just doesn't, it's like running a marathon every single month. I don't, who would say that that's a healthy thing to do?
No, I think you're right. And I think part of the problem was my belief that that's what makes a hero, like that's what that's what shows the world your worth, is that you can just keep on going no matter how hard and how much. So this idea that, a therapist sitting there should be able to be a support for so many people, or a single minister or a single teacher, I think you're completely right. And I think we're going to see this probably pretty quickly in the psychedelic retreat world. We had a conversation today with some folks out in Colorado, and they're talking about all the retreats they're getting ready to start out there. And I just think to myself that folks have no idea what they are opening up. Like, no idea. Even if you're not taking mushrooms with people, the psychic, emotional weight that it imparts just in the session, not to mention the preparation, the integration, and the ongoing support that people will need. You have no idea how, when you open these doors for people, then you have a responsibility. I believe that we have a responsibility to them years into the future, because so much gets unleashed. I have seen so many people who, after a couple of doses of mushrooms, it's not like they were messed up or anything, but they needed a real emotional support. They needed real.
Right. And that's like, I do really wonder, like, when integrated in community, like, I wonder how different that would look. Be so different. And feel, if you really imagine like more of a village setting where people are amongst each other, going about their business every day and naturally like letting things unfold together in the midst of the people who were with you and holding space with you in such an intensive experience, like living with someone. It's like you and me, like we live together all the time. And when things come up, like being able to work together every day throughout the day, we have time to like let things unfold and process things and bring things up, as opposed to like if we were to see each other once a week, right? It's like, well, it's right now, and this is the only time we're gonna have, and like the how different that feels. Pressure. Pressure, and just like with the retreat model, the level of isolation that there is when you depart from that, and try the energy it takes to seek out somebody to talk to who will understand, just that in itself, the energy of trying to find someone to talk to, or trying to get yourself to reach out to somebody, even if you know who to talk to, like reaching out in isolation from them, living in another place in the world. And just, it's a totally different experience than integrating yourself, being integrated in a community that's regularly meeting up already. You don't have to be trying to plan to talk about a thing or an emotion that you're feeling and schedule it out 2 weeks from now and like try and summon it back up. And it's just so different. So
I truly believe, based on our experience, that this is the future of how it's going to work. The professional support model is not sustainable in this kind of work. I don't believe. I just don't see it being that way, because of everything that we've experienced and everything that you're saying now. And, that is, like you've already said it, but it's not to try to plug it, but it's try to, help people understand that if you want to get ahead of the curve, if you want to get the most out of your experiences, if you want to be able to, I don't want to say this, if you want the best safety net, because they're like, even though psilocybin is so safe from a toxicological standpoint, you need an emotional, psychic safety net. And the community is going to be the sustainable way to do that.
Yeah. I'm over this way we're doing things with, like,
even look at
families
look at our presidency. Look at how we run the country, right? We have like this one person that's supposed to be the go-to guy, or hopefully someday gal.
Reference. Yeah.
Right?
What was that?
Because it's been
Or
fucking
someday.
white dudes
Oh, yeah.
it's just like, are we ever going to have like, seriously?
I know.
Like,
Seriously, we're still doing this? There's still only men.
old white
up there?
men.
What?
The fuck? But I mean, that is emblematic of where we are, culturally. And that trickles down into all of these other forms of leadership, right? It's like the people lead in the way that they are shown. And so,
it trickles up too. I mean, the people are like that system. It's just reflective of the whole whole system.
Exactly. You see the presidents when they come out of office, like every single president, when they come out of office, they look fucking ragged, right?
Right. That should not. Nobody should have to endure that kind of hellacious experience. I can only imagine what it's like.
No, well,
honestly.
and like I did it. I did it, not knowingly.
You're the president?
I was the president of Mushroom Land for a while there.
and the whore.
And the whore.
And the mushroom whore.
I was getting fucked from every angle. But it's like, it's just not fair to put that on anybody. So I don't know, maybe this conversation has evolved from, is there such thing as too much mushrooms, to is there such thing as too much responsibility for facilitators or leaders, or however you want to call it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So just to kind of come back to how much mushroom is too much mushroom. Have you worked with anybody who you felt like, wow, this person is consuming too many mushrooms?
Yes.
Okay. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah, that's great. And it's, again, like, it's not the same amount. There's no way that you can standardize what is too much for a general population. But generally, when you see someone who is maybe frantic, scattered, sometimes paranoia, if you just can't shut off the valve. And the challenge with that is that even like myself in that state, it's like when you're manic, I don't know if you've ever been through any type of manic state, but can't nobody tell you to get off that high horse. Can't nobody tell you to stop having fun. The fuck, what's wrong with you? You're telling me that I'm having too much fun, So when you're on the inside of that, like, just, explosive exploration, and it can be really hard to see that you're getting out of touch, that people are not able to connect with you. I'm thinking of a couple of folks who I've worked with who, they had some very powerful experiences with the mushroom that were very positive, and so they just believed that, well, okay, then I should just take more and I'll get even better. And there's some truth in that, but it's much more nuanced. Take more over longer periods of time. And so, like, there have been a couple of people who I have said to them, like, I really think it would be valuable for you to take a 6-month break eating mushrooms. And that was not received well, because they believed that they were continuing to get benefit, kept on riding this, kind of state of mania. And each one of those individuals, at a certain point, the experience turned on them and became terrifying. And then they, were like, holy shit, I did too much. And every single time, and there's still a few people out there, like there's a couple people right now that I know that they need to scale back. It would be beneficial to them anyway to pull back. And they're not doing that. at some point they may very well circle back and be like, yeah, I went too far too fast.
So you mean like from the inside, it's like they are expressing that they're feeling like what? Like they're getting a lot of great, positive messaging, or
I never
like,
thought I was taking too many mushrooms. As extreme as my emotional states were, as open as I was, like started having like open eye visuals. Like I've mentioned to you at times, but there would be like, we'd be in bed and I would see lights all around you, or
well, towards the end of mid 2020, well, let's see, when retreats picked back up again,
it wasn't the
August
mushrooms though, that I
2020.
felt like it was too much. It was the people and all the trauma and all the information.
But I remember
from
you
the people.
specifically saying, I think I need to take a break from eating mushrooms. I don't think I should eat mushrooms. I remember there being, as like every retreat would start, and at that point in time, like getting towards like July, August of 2020 and post COVID break, and you would say, I really don't think I can eat mushrooms this retreat, and I feel like I need to eat mushrooms for the people coming, but I feel like I really don't want to. And then you would eat mushrooms, even if it was just a little bit. I remember you like saying, I'm just gonna do like 1 gram or something like that. And I remember you expressing that it felt like a lot, like you're starting your tolerance or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it dropped significantly during that time period.
That's funny. Yeah, I do remember times thinking like, yeah, I need to back off, and then when I would do it, I would feel it would be great, and I would get on that kind of that expansive state, and like, but God, it's so tricky because there is absolutely a part of me that felt and feels still like there's no such thing as too much. And then there's also a part of me that felt and feels like it was complete overwhelmment, and that I was just like, I was cracking at the seams, you know? So yeah, maybe I'm not the best judge.
Let's not ask Eric how much is too much, because he don't motherfucker know. Look at him. I mean, okay.
It's kind of my thing though with life, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm a little bit of an extremist.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it does make sense in terms of, I mean, you can't ask like, what's that guy? The Navy guy, the Jacques guy who like gets up at 4 a.m. and the famous,
I don't know.
God, his name is Jacques something, whatever.
I know who you're talking about.
And he just lifts crazy amounts of weights and pushes his limits to the extreme, or like Wim Hof or whatever. Like you can't ask somebody like that how much is too much, but you have the world like following their lead on things and being inspired by them. And it's like you have people all over the spectrum. And depending on like where you are in life, you're going to have a different experience of tolerance of things. And like right now, I'd be curious to see how you would assess, like knowing if how much is too much, like after the past couple of years of reflection and a lot more like stillness. Compared to the years prior to us getting back from Jamaica, if you have if you're more sensitive to your emotional states and being aware of them, and cannabis being so incredibly like that was so heavily mixed in to
it was
that questioning and confusion, like. Cannabis is a wonderful medicine and tool in this realm, and it is something that is so easily like it catches up and contributes to fogginess when used. I think
for sure
too much.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, there's something that used to come up to me very often when I would take mushrooms, and I would kind of ask the mushrooms if I've taken too much. And there was this repeatedly, it would come across and say to me, whenever you take mushrooms, it's the right time. And there very much did become, and there were many, at least in 2019, 2020, there were quite a few retreats where I didn't take any mushrooms at all. Mm-hmm. Okay. I was like, look at me like, no, but
yeah, for sure.
There were quite a few retreats that I didn't take any mushrooms at all. So, it's kind of like that whole thing that Abraham Hicks and Bashar and some of this same kind of sentiment is passed through, in that there's no such thing as what's right or wrong. Like, whatever's happening is what's supposed to happen. Now, that's a tricky statement because, like overdoses of other drugs, or there were times when it was too much. Excuse me. God, but there is also this divine perfection of whatever is right.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to bypass. I want, like, for real.
I know. I know what you're saying. And also, because when I reflect on us living in Southern Indiana and having, for me, the most intensive mushroom practice of my life was during that time, like pre us having kids and international business and everything. And I remember a point where I felt like I was losing the ability to interact with other people in a relatable way. Like, I remember a point where I felt like I could not walk into the city or a crowd without being completely overwhelmed and uncomfortable. And I remember not enjoying that experience. And at the time, I just thought, I kind of developed like a superiority feeling about it. Like, I'm over here like doing black belt training in the woods, and y'all just don't get it. And that was a part of my learning experience at that time, for sure. Just part of my growth as a human. But while I enjoy very much so like that kind of black belt training, I also enjoy being able to relate to community in a broader sense, and is personally very important to me. And the mushroom during, like, at that time, same time, the mushrooms, I had a couple of trips where they were making, like, what I interpreted as they were making fun of me, like thinking I was so like superior, thinking my practice of eating mushrooms so regularly was like so important. And like, I remember a trip where I was yelling at, whatever you want to call it, the spirit of the mushroom, that intelligence communicating with me. And I was like, what the actual fuck? Like, stop fucking with me. You're fucking with me. You're trying to tell me to eat mushrooms and you're laughing at me. And then, like, what am I even doing this for? Like, you're just using me. And it was like a whole week of me just being irritated with the mushroom and feeling completely used. Like, the mushroom was using me for its greater, greater scheme that I wasn't aware of, and was just a little tiny tool in it. And still, I'm like, there can be codependent relationships, even with plant fungi medicine. And that I do kind of feel like was one in a way where I was just putting so much weight on the mushroom as a teacher and not enough weight on my community as a teacher. Like I just kind of started disregarding humans as being teachers and was so heavily focused on the mushroom. So yeah, I feel like it's just like a constant, all right, let's check in. How we feeling about, you know, where we're putting our attention and on what. And so
I think you're right about that. I think thinking about it in terms of a codependent relationship is an interesting perspective. And what you're saying about just reevaluating the relationship is valuable in all scenarios, like reevaluating, you know, whatever your domestic relationships, your work relationships, you know, all that. I feel I haven't dosed since the camping retreat, and I only took, I think, 2 grams then. I haven't done a dose of mushrooms just by myself for a very long time. And I feel like that's the check-in that I really need. Because when you're doing this for others, you're not really getting a good read on your own condition. So anyway, I guess we have no answers for our listeners. We don't know what we're talking about. We don't know. We don't know what's too much. We don't know what's not enough. It's just, you know, eat some mushrooms and figure it out your damn self. I don't know.
My takeaway is this. We all need reflection. We need reflections from other humans like us, embodied in this form in life. I feel like that is a big part of why we're here, having this experience with each other. And step number 1 in knowing if you're eating too many mushrooms is to ask somebody who you trust, who has a similar trust in the process, or is familiar enough to know that mushrooms are safe, they're non-toxic, they're an important part of your life experience if that is how you feel about mushrooms. Somebody that's gonna like talk with you in a non-judgmental way and be able to point out like, well, you know, you have like changed in a kind of a way that I'm a little, I don't know, like wondering about.
How
like
come none of the people that we worked with in Jamaica ever said anything to me besides you?
Did they not?
Nobody ever.
Well, for one, because that wasn't, while yes, it was kind of a community, it was a business.
Yeah,
You're talking about employees.
I think that's the key, yeah. Hey, boss.
Hey, I think
Hey,
you're...
boss, maybe you're going a little too far with the work stuff there. No.
I think maybe there were conversations had behind your back. As that's how it goes.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks
That's
y'all.
how it
Appreciate
goes, right? So I'm talking about like peers. Like, who are your people? If you feel like you don't have any people to, even if it's one person that you feel like you are close enough with, who cares about you enough and is going to be real with you, then I like, that's an important thing to find. And if that means going to more community meetups and like-minded community events, like go do that and find a friend that you can speak with. Cause like, it really is so, nobody's going to tell you, like, it's going to be so hard to know.
That's why I'm laughing, because my takeaway is that you will never know if you're taking too many mushrooms. It will take other people to help you figure that out.
Yeah, there we go. That's the takeaway.
It's kind of where it feels like. Did you and Athena, did Athena ever say to you in Jamaica, I think Eric's taking too many mushrooms? She's a friend, and I consider her like...
I don't know if that specifically, probably went more like, I think Eric needs a break like tomorrow. Like quite a few times. And I would say similar things to her. quite a few times.
Yeah, we were all pushing it way too hard down there.
Yeah, we were all saying the same things to each other and
really,
feeling like in a...
I don't know. I'm just really thinking about this developing industry here in the States and Colorado and Oregon. And, it's not, I don't want to try. I'm not trying to sound like I know more or anything like that, but I really, truly feel like very few people have any idea what they're about to get into in opening regular psychedelic retreats.
Right. Well, it's only one way to find out what we're getting into with anything is to just find out. Fuck around and find out. And I hope that, that I'm sure there's going to be retreat centers out there that want to learn from what other retreat centers. There are not many of them that have been running for very long, but I would hope that they would. I'm confident there's going to be some that want to learn how to do things better. And hopefully part of that is like cycling through people to hold space and not, heavily relying on one or two. What
we're doing at Sanctuary, I think the foundation of what we're doing with the Sacred Mushroom Seminary is hopefully we're, this is something that's going to turn into a larger, long-term educational process so that we can help facilitators better understand kind of how this works, right? Like the functioning. As we're talking here, I'm thinking about ayahuasqueros and cultures where this is ayahuasca is an embedded part of their community. You have people who are taking ayahuasca every weekend, and it's not just the shaman. Like there are people in the community that come and sit with medicine every weekend, and nobody would ever say, you're not taking time to integrate, you're doing too much. But what they have is that spread out of the community. And if we can begin to better understand as a culture the function, the form, and the function of the psychedelic experience, it is not just this serotonin response, and we can help people understand how to better spread out that psychic weight so that it's not this, single responsible or just a few responsible individuals. It ultimately becomes more beautiful, right? Like we have this hero culture in the United States where, we want to be the professional. We want to be the expert, like you say. But like when everybody is just an expert in being human, I think that's so much more rewarding. It's so much more enjoyable. It reminds me of the rainbow fish story that Theo has, Like you don't want to be. It's great to be the center of attention for a little while, but it becomes a burden. And we like this celebrity culture and the hero worship or whatever. It's just maybe that is more of the issue than like how much mushrooms we take, how much psychedelics we take. Spread it out.
Yeah. Spread it out. Phone a friend. And that's it.
Really felt like there needed to be something else, didn't you? You're looking for it.
But the power of threes, I don't know.
That Trinity.
Yeah. Spread it out. Phone a friend.
And eat mushrooms.
Eat a mushroom.
Yeah.
But not too much. Don't need too many.
Well, that's why you got to call the friend so they can tell you.
Yeah, and then you call the friend.
All right. Well, once again, we have not solved any problems here. Those of you who made it this far,
thanks for listening.
What are you really doing with your life?
Comment below if you're watching on YouTube and let us know if you made it through this episode and if you felt like there's been a time in your life where you've consumed too many psychedelics and nobody or everybody was telling you to ease up on it.
Weed. Oh boy. The weed.
We could record so many episodes on cannabis, I feel like.
Can I do the
Well, looks like you just did.
hit. All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.